as has been predicted, we've got a crisis pending. So we have huge areas of southern Africa now with the drought pending. And really that is to do with management of the surface, in that most of the soil does not, the water does not penetrate into the soil, and it creates this runoff. And I mean, this is something that's been talked about for decades, and yet the remedial action is far slower than to make any difference. And really, soil is the basis of all our culture and life. Originally, the planet was rocks and whatever, and it was only when life and plants started that you got soil. And if you look at all the places where there's so-called good soil, it's where there have been millennia and millennia and millennia of plants and life, And I mean, I see this more and more, is it's the roots and life that creates the soil, And if you then have a regime that kills life and destroys life, you're going to lose your soil. It's been demonstrated. Henry Elwood demonstrated it categorically. By having no cover, your soil's got 50 to 100 tons per season, per hectare.
What does soil mean to...
This is the thing, is people now have this kind of analytical, compartmentalized notion of it. Is they're analyzing all the little bits like the minerals and the things. And it's only really in recent times that people are beginning to understand the critical role of all the microorganisms in that soil. It's the easiest way to think of it is as the words that you've used. It's like a living entity, mighty complex. It's a synergy of a multitude of bacteria, fungi, algae, as well as the roots. I mean, for me, that's the critical thing with the plants, is the plants bring solar energy into the soil, so that you've got energy available for life. Something, it takes ages to build a soil, because you need season after season of roots and microorganisms working to bring it up. And yet it can be lost in an instant if it's not managed properly. One downpour, this year we've had, what they're predicting about extremes has happened this year. We've had actually less rain this year, but what's tended to happen is it's all come in about 3 heavy downpours. It was only last week that we had the more typical soft rain. It's just kind of come, down 30 millimeters, and then the next day it's gone. And with those kind of conditions, you can lose a massive amount of your soil. You can see it in the estuary here, all the rivers around. The soil is just gone, as well as the water. So water's not being retained in the soil. We've been talking about this for like 30, I don't know how many years, 30, 40, even longer years. And yet, still, it's an issue. It's been getting worse and worse and worse. There are some trends that are encouraging, like the terminology is bewildering sometimes. Quite a big move on the bigger farmers is what they call conservation farming, where they're moving to a more minimum tillage system where there are, there's regular cover and less mechanical disturbance and use of agrochemicals. I use this little bucket when I'm weeding in the nursery and, thinning out plants. And I introduced worms, and you can see what has happened now. This has become soil. These little guys turned organic matter into humus and soil, basically, or the most vital ingredient of soil. And, in the old days we used to think of this very simply. We have the word humus without really comprehending its complexity and its essential qualities. So we have a very simple word, whereas this is in fact, humus is a very complex matrix of millions of bacteria and fungi and all sorts of things. It is absolutely vital to soil conditioning to have this material in the soil. And from a grower's perspective, it's the most potent remedial measure you can make is to have humus. If you're wanting to grow good vegetables, I found this is without a doubt the most effective means of producing food. A little square centimeter is like 1 million microorganisms. And these form a very vital association with the roots of plants and enable the mobilization of minerals to take place and to get healthy growth. So here's yesterday's vegetable trimmings. There's carrots and parsnips and radish and turnips. All of those are recycled and used to feed the worms. Particularly that little red wriggler species just converts that into black humus. Makes a very rich compost. The plan is to eventually have a worm farm here. We use our own seeds. So there's a cycle going here now, is we would take the seeds, especially when they're organic.
You eat roses?
Yeah, didn't you know that?
No.
And rose hips are used to make a jelly. People often say you can't grow roses without chemicals. So here we're growing them with no chemicals. They've gone in a bit of cold turkey, not having chemicals. But
Have they?
They're coming back. Yeah, they weren't. They were in a shocking condition when we arrived.
So are they preferring it without chemicals?
That's why I said a bit of cold turkey. They're taking time to readjust, which is quite a well-known thing. Is that because what you've got to do is re-establish the mycorrhiza in the root system. So if you go and spray a fungicide, especially a systemic fungicide on the rose, you're killing all the mycorrhiza. And that's why you have a problem with health, and then why a lot of people get caught in a cycle of dependency, being a sucker for all the chemicals that are around. Whereas actually naturally, I mean, a rose has been grown for millennia. Birds are the most incredible workers in the garden. Last week I watched a small collared sunbird hovering through the citrus trees and taking off all the aphids that are beginning to build up on the citrus tree. And at the end of the day, there were no aphids left at all on that. And there are many other birds. The other aspect to it is they're fantastic recyclers of probably one of the most crucial elements in the form of phosphate. There's all those tiny little bird poos are fantastic supplements to fertilize the garden and make a mineral that is often a limiting factor available in a particular area. As I say, phosphate is probably one of the most limiting minerals available. And yet the birds are able to forage from far afield and concentrate phosphate in an area. And this is the old Israeli system, the old Hebrew system of keeping pigeons that range, and then you collect the manure and use it in the garden. So birds are all together. There are very few that are a problem, and they're usually
What about the chicken?
Chicken also does it to a lesser extent because it's not quite so mobile. I mean, that's what we are hoping to get chickens, a chicken system. So the plans for the next year are that we have a chicken tractor system converting a lawn into a food garden. So the chickens would dig up the lawn, keeping them quite confined and concentrated so that they really do dig it up and fertilize it. Then we would plant and the chickens would move and then follow a rotation system. But the chickens would then move through the system and provide the fertility that's needed.
What is this beetroot and garlic? They're interplanted, huh?
Yeah,
What's around the edge?
marginal. My policy here is to try and get living cover as opposed to dead cover. More living cover simply because of the intensive nature of this garden. So the reason that's at that stage is so we can get the seeds. Unfortunately, we've harvested most of the collie off this. This is a purple collie, chamomile. It's about to flower with the cabbage family. There's the cabbages.
They like to live together.
Yeah. It's quite a nice little mini one. This is dill one side, fennel the other. So one of the advantages of a fennel flower is it attracts predatory wasps to the flowers, and then the predatory wasps help to suppress other pests. There's a wasp. So I've done the permaculture thing of all fruit trees have flowers and herbs around them. So here's the beginning of soil. We have a primal rock. We have lichens, which is a mixture of algae and fungi that are slowly but surely dissolving the rock and creating little pockets of soil. So this is, scientists regard as the sort of primal process, the beginnings of building up soil. So these lichens secrete little acids that slowly dissolve the rock. They recycle, the sunlight is trapped by the algae to provide energy for the system. And as they dissolve, they create little fissures where the water can remain, and you get your first plants emerging. Next stage, your mosses as well. Slowly but surely dissolving and catching nutrients. Because when you look at a soil, it's really telling you historically what life has existed in that particular area for millennia. And I think if you were really discerning, and then you could actually probably get a very good picture, or you can actually get a very good picture of what life existed. In fact, roots are probably the best way of tilling the soil, is to establish roots and recycle plants through a system. There are many aspects to it. Is what the permaculture people call the mineral mining, is your roots penetrate down and bring out nutrients to the surface, and then the organisms down. So you're creating all your fundamental cycles. As I say, they're definitely all the fundamental things that are really needed for life. Is that your energies from the sun are stored, move from up, down, below. They help the infiltration of water, the movement of minerals, the circulation of air, are all critical functions that depend very much on a matrix of roots in the substrate soil.
Are there certain types of soil that more easily sustain life?
I think what I said is a testimony. You can see a soil that has a vital history of life, and a soil that where life has in a sense been impeded in one way or another. So those marvelous deep soils that you find, for example, in Zimbabwe or certain parts of, say, Mpumalanga or Limpopo, really deep subtropical soils. Those are places where you can see that life has been humming for a very long time. You go to a more arid place, like even in the mountains here, a situation like that, you can see that, you know, life has struggled for a long period of time. And as I said, the soil is really telling you what kind of life history has happened in that particular place. So there is a difference, yeah. But once you start building up a soil and bringing life into a soil, you find that your capacity for life grows almost exponentially. You know, so if you're bringing life into a very dead soil, slowly but surely the capacity of that soil for more life starts building up and up and up and up. As I say, you get, the critical factor is the soil life. There's millions of microorganisms. So those all form around roots. As that plant goes through its cycle, they remain and migrate to other plants that are established. And I think there's a lot you can do by consciously planting areas with suitable plants and building up that soil organic matter. And obviously creating a cover so that things are retained. Water is retained, the soil is not oxidized by the sun or washed away by the rain. You know, so your plants are absolutely critical to building up the soil.
They have a thing called where they basically put the roots in some kind of, they've just used sort of sand as a kind of...
And hydroponics is the extreme example as well. Well, I'm not a great advocate of it, actually. I mean, You still get your microorganisms associating with the roots, but it's really a system that developed out of our industrial system, where we only think of a plant needs nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and you kind of pump it in the water system so that the plant is, as it drinks, it takes the nutrients, and you get very pumped up plants, which I think are not as healthy as in a healthy. Look, it might be a system that can work under certain circumstances. I mean, recently someone was reminding me of the fish farming system where the water from a fish farm is recycled through some horticultural system of growing plants. And that's done through sand, basically a very inert medium. But it doesn't solve the planetary problem of soil. You know, it can be a strategy that is effective in an urban area, metropolitan area. You know, it provides income, it has many, many benefits, but it's not an ideal situation. I think animals are an essential as a process of recycling plants. Yes, all kinds of animals. We're animals, for a start.
You mentioned once a system of livestock farming that would work better, that somebody in Zimbabwe had devised.
Yeah, quite a lot of people. Yes, animals can be used to rebuild soil. And it's really their ability to recycle material and create ground cover.
Explain?
It's not an easy one to explain succinctly and briefly. But basically what it is it grew out of an observation here in Africa, is that we had large herds of animals that moved through the veldt in high concentration, but for extremely short periods of time. And during that time, they brought down dry grasses and material to the surface and manured the ground, so that material started a decomposition process of the microorganisms, and then provided a seed bed which provided more effective regeneration when the seasonal cycle came into a wet phase. I mean, from my observation, there were several farmers applying those principles very satisfactorily and producing high quality and very viable operations. And you began to see where the cattle had built up an area, a reintroduction of a huge amount of wildlife would follow them. The space between plants became very tight, and you could just visibly sense a vitality of the veldt. And that's in dry, arid areas. Animals, in some sense, are often blamed for desertification, and there's an element of truth to it, but I think it's actually the human management of the animals that's the issue, not the animals themselves.
You know, one of the strange things I found is people not able to comprehend that right in their garden there's something to be harvested. We are harvesting our hydrocarbons from sunlight that fell on the earth all that way back. But when you tell people they could actually be harvesting sunlight right off their gardens when they mow their lawn and when they're pruning their trees, they look at you completely dumbfounded and don't realize that there's this energy sitting right in their gardens which can be turned into incredible use for that particular householder,
well, if we look
or for that farm, or for that plot. And they don't understand that you're actually harvesting sunlight.
Well, if you consider what sustainability truly is about, it's been very commoditized.
Absolutely.
The whole movement's it's rancid. It's as bad as organic, or even permaculture falls into it. They've all just been neatly packaged.
Yeah.
And out there, there's still control factors in it. And really, I think sustainability is about the relationship one has with oneself, with one's immediate environment, and how one interacts with that.
Yeah.
And to do it in a positive way. I'm very much involved in food, water, energy, that side of things. I process a lot of alien vegetation into energy, into carbon, trying to find soil amendments. And we've developed quite some interesting stuff. We're busy setting up a centre of learning that we have where we focus on kids in their 20s. The idea is really to take a step backwards to the crossroads where greed superseded need, where we sort of lift the environment and the social structures out of the equation and focus purely on a profit-driven society. I think as far as localized government goes, we're at the bottom of the barrel, and it's a race to the bottom, sadly. It's not saying, well, let's take whatever's left and let's try and do something with it in a positive way. I think that the ability to implement anything is long gone, if it was ever there. And really, so yeah, my focus is very much on post-collapse, as opposed to trying to hold on to something. I think the sooner the better. Unfortunately, if you look at our education systems and how it's conditioned the mind to be very consumptive. For example, a simple thing like NPK ratios. There's no scientific backup to prove that there's anything to it besides the fact that somebody's selling it. And you'll find that same company who's selling it is supporting the so-called soil science university division and giving you a degree to keep that treadmill going. The soil itself is, if you look at these big fertilizer companies, they basically, their attitude is we will handle anything that nature can throw at us. And that is a terrifying statement, but that's their catchline. The plant and soil, the relationship is purely just to hold it upright now. And the tests that I do up in the Northwest Province, basically 4% of the chemicals that the guys are applying are actually absorbed into the high levels. It's so anaerobic right now as well. The soil has become so anaerobic. The compaction through the ploughing, consistent ploughing, the releasing of the gases. All these things have a huge role to play in where we are now. And the answer from the big fertilizer companies, who are very much hand in hand with government, as it was a pillar of the government chemical fertilizer, nothing's changed. It's still exactly the same. The mentality is still there. Nothing's changed. And besides the fact that they're just using more and more now, because it's not staying in the top levels. So what we're busy doing now is we've developed a seed coating, call it a pellet. Now this is not necessarily new technology. They were using pellets, clay pellets, in the 1940s in Arizona. A very small amount of compost and wild grasses, and trying to fight the desert the encroachments and things like that. And they were using aeroplanes. And we've taken that technology now, and so we've created a pellet, and it's about 5%, sort of 90% pure carbon, with a very low ash content, which we inoculate with microorganisms. We've got in that pellet, we've got rhizomes, we've got mycorrhiza, as well as the seed, volcanic rock dust, and a bentonite clay.
Bentonite, yes.
And the concept behind it is to really just scratch the surface and apply the seeds that lift up. So what's happening now is that we're finding we only need to be on the land, say, 4 to 5 times. So it's about a third of the time, which it makes a huge difference. And because we're giving the root structure, as now you either irrigate or it rains, the seed swells. There's germination within it, so there's no sort of insects or birds that are going to take the seed away. It's a lump of clay, and then there's germination takes place, and now the root zone that's created around it, because we're actually awakening the soil through this process. There's no more need for fertilizers or anything like that. Even we're reducing compost hugely. What we found is that the more you put these on, it's just like one big drug addict that just needs more and more and more. But there's so much now that's lying in the dormant soil, and waking that up and creating a relationship with all those organisms, as well as the root zone. You outcompete the roots first of all. In
Yeah.
fact, the roots can become food
Yeah,
for
they
that.
would, yeah.
And so suddenly we're getting exaggerated growth. Not only that, but we're able to now, if we penetrate further down using, for example, some long-rooted grasses, we're able to take that carbon down
Yeah.
and store. So it's amending the soil
Yeah.
deep down. It's acting as a carbon sink. So it's negating greenhouse gas. We're getting it down there.
Yeah.
And we're storing, and we're now interacting with the soil. And so our growth has surpassed any up to 300%.
Wow.
What we're getting without putting on anything on top.
The bentonite is just releasing that moisture at a
Correct.
very, very
Correct.
subtle, controlled way, ideal for the seed.
That's
It
right.
couldn't wish. It couldn't wish for a better.
We're giving it.
better jacket.
Well, we're giving it the best wake-up call
Yeah.
that we possibly can.
Yeah.
We're using about 30% amount of water through this process, and the other exciting concept. But what we're calling is the silver bullet, and within the fertilizer industry and the chemical industry, it's the unicorn.
Yeah.
That it sort of doesn't really exist, and this is the closest thing. We've got a lot of critics obviously out there, and they can't fault it.
Well, I mean, look at the critics that are now surrounding a seed in a coating of
Chemicals.
chemical. All the phyto little governors that are in there,
Yeah.
they just get knocked before they even get a chance to come into life.
Governments put a lot of money in, developing, trying to get emerging farmers into the channel. Unfortunately, they're just perpetuating the whole problem because nothing's changed as far as the implementation of the agriculture. But what is very clear is that agriculture is a debt-based industry.
But it also needs oil. That's the enzymes, vitamins, and minerals. The micronutrients is the oil to keep that engine functioning. Now, if I eat my chocolate, the sugar is converted to glucose, and this is turned into energy, and it sparks more than 7 trillion chemical reactions per second, each needing an enzyme, vitamin, and mineral. Then we have to ask ourselves, these enzymes, vitamins, and minerals, are they in the chocolate? I'm talking about a normal chocolate bar. Would there be any live enzymes? If we think that enzymes are destroyed at 48 centigrades, there would not be any life. And there's hardly any vitamins and minerals in that slab or that bar of chocolate. Now, if it's not in the chocolate, where will my body get these nutrients to help my body to convert the sucrose to glucose to energy? Because I'm not eating an apple with the chocolate, supplying it. It will take it from other places in my system. Our skin is the largest organ, not the most active, so we won't steal from our heart or our liver, but we'll first take nutrients from the skin. And that's our first sign of aging. We start to get wrinkles. And then we'll start to take nutrients from our bones. And as we age, nutrient density, bone density decrease and osteoporosis, and we get all these bone fractures and problems. And then just where there is a fire, there's always smoke. So we have a lot of metabolic waste. So there's free radicals and a lot of waste that is generated by these processes happening in the system. And this imbalance we create on a cellular level is all the degenerative diseases we struggle with today. It's diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, chronic fatigue. Because if I have a sick cell depleted of the essential enzymes, vitamins and minerals, and a toxic buildup, and it's not getting the air and the water and the fuel source, that cell's going to be sick. And if I have a sick cell, I have a sick organ, a sick system, and a sick body in the end of the day. So we have to look what we put into our body. Anything that you put in your mouth, you must ask yourself, am I now giving to my system, or am I actually taking away? We think of that chocolate as extra kilo on the hip. We don't see it as something that's actually depleting the system of nutrients. Now, if we think of sugar cane, it's a live plant growing there with all the enzymes, vitamins, minerals, the fiber. Everything is in that plant that's needed to convert the sugar, the sucrose, to glucose, to energy. But what do? It's that white sugar stripped away and isolated, refined and isolated and stripped away of all these important nutrients. So if we think that's the bulk of what we eat is carbohydrates, but it's this processed carbohydrates. It's also in our grains, in the hull or the husk, the outside layers of the grain, where we have the most nutritional value. And with all the processing and refining, we lose all those nutrients. It's white rice, it's white pasta, it's pizza in the morning, pizza for lunch or supper, it's white bread. It fills our tummy, it gives us some energy, but doesn't have these important nutrients. If you have a lovely red Ferrari, and I tell most of my clients, you're a beautiful red Ferrari, you would value that car. And you'll make sure you put the best grade petrol in there, the best, but also oil. What's going to happen to that car if you don't put oil into the engine? It's going to seize sooner or later. But we do that on a daily basis to our own system. I'm going to just mention the rest of the list of factors that has a negative impact on our system. If we look at smoke, nicotine is a stimulant, so it stimulates reactions, but it's not supplying nutrients to support that stimulation. It will deplete a lot of zinc, it will increase heavy metal cadmium, and it will also deplete lots of vitamin C from the system. So it's not only tar on the lungs, but I create a lot of imbalances in my system. If we look at alcohol, in red wine, there's a high sugar content. The sugar needs to be metabolized and broken down. The alcohol needs to be metabolized. It stimulates a lot of reactions. It's put a lot of stress, the phenols, on my detoxification channels. And it needs nutrients. It will need enzymes, vitamins, and minerals to support those, which is not supplied by the alcohol, by the wine, or the beer that I drink. So I deplete nutrients from my system. And the same with caffeine. That cup of coffee that I drink in the morning to kickstart my engine gives energy, it gives that boost, but it's not supplying the nutrients to sustain and maintain. Also, the problem with alcohol and caffeine, it dehydrates the system. It has a diuretic effect, and that will even furthermore wash nutrients out of my system. And then if we look at additives, all the colorants and flavorants and preservatives that's added to food, all these synthetic chemicals. My body is so uniquely designed. If you think of 7 trillion chemical reactions that can transform a chocolate to energy. But now I put this strange, funny, synthetic molecule or chemical inside my body. Your cells don't know what to do with that. So it stores it in the fat cells, and there they build up and they accumulate. Many of these chemicals are carcinogenic. They will cause cancer in the long run. They build up in our system, and they put a lot of stress on the liver to try to break that down and to detox it, taking more nutrients from our system. And something like tartrazine will bind to zinc, so it depletes more nutrients. And then if we look at medication, because many people don't relate illness to food. If we're ill, we go to the doctor and we get a drug to treat us. But medication will treat a specific symptom. If I have a headache, I will drink a pain pill. But I don't have a headache because I've got an aspirin deficiency. It will simply block a pain reaction, or it will stimulate another reaction. But it's not addressing the real cause of why I have a headache. It's most probably because I dehydrated, magnesium deficient, or toxic blood circulating through my head. And then just another factor. Last but not least is stress we're exposed to in our daily life. We don't every day run away from a lion and breathe fast and your heart beats fast, but it becomes like a chronic internal stress, just our everyday lifestyle. It's like driving that red Ferrari at high revs. So you'll burn more petrol, more oil, and more exhaust fumes. That whole acceleration of the aging process. It's important to handle stress, body, mind, and spirit. So not only to eat good food, but emotionally and spiritually balance my life and look at a healthy life. And then eating God-made, God-given food in its most unspoiled form, That's my fruits and vegetables supplying the enzymes, vitamins, and minerals. We're supposed to eat 5 to 9 different fruits and vegetables per day, just to supply the enzymes, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, the oil for my car, to keep my car going. Usually I limit it to 2 fruit a day. It's easy to eat 7 bananas and fruit salad, but it's a kale, broccoli, spinach, Brussels sprouts, celery that we don't eat on a daily basis, which is nutrient dense. So it's important to focus and realize this is the oil for my car to keep my engine going. I think today the big problem is we don't get the right nutrients into our diet. We don't eat the fruits and vegetables we suppose, and the quantities we suppose. And even if we do, they're devoid of nutrients. Some of the oranges has 0% vitamin C in them because they hybridized, they're seedless, they're picked when they're grass green, the soil is depleted, and they twice before they land on our plate. But we're not eating the food we suppose, they're devoid of nutrients, plus we do all these negative factors that's further depleting nutrients from our system. So we have a double negative. We're not getting the nutrients, we have these habits that's depleting more nutrients from our system, plus we bombard our body with toxins and drugs that's foreign to our system that our body can't work and can't cope with. So this will just give us that on why it's so important to eat food in its most unspoiled form, nutrient dense. And just think of your red Ferrari. You'll put the best grade of petrol, okay, like the manufacturer of that car has intended, and oil to get the best performance out of that car. And we must respect ourselves and do the same. That's the first aspect of balanced nutrition. On the second one, I'll just focus on balance and proportions, and I think that is where the big debate lies, is what is the proportions and what should we eat? To me, it is to balance 20% of our diet. If this is our plate of food, 20% of that should be our complex carbohydrate. Complex carbohydrates is our sweet potato, butternut, our starchy veg, our whole grains, brown rice. And then 20% should be our protein. That can be animal and vegetable source of protein, our free-range eggs and pulses, our beans. And then 10% must be fats and oils. But 50% on our plate should be our salad vegetables. And every meal should be balanced like this. There's a lot of variation to this theme, but for me the realization came that this is how our body composition looked like. We are made of 60% water. 60 to 70% of our body composition is water. And this is our water phase. There's no water in protein, fats, and oils. So, and then also this is very micronutrient dense. So we need all those micronutrients to sustain, like I've explained, our system. So the bulk of our diet, this is supplying the fiber, the water, and the micronutrients. Our body composition is 20% protein. So it makes sense proportionally that that's the amount of protein we should get from our diet. And we shouldn't be more than 10-12% fat. That's an ideal body composition. So it makes sense that proportionally that should be our fat intake. Just also to note that complex carbs, proteins, and fats are all acid forming, whereas our salad and vegetables is alkaline. And it's therefore very important to balance the acidity and alkalinity in our diet. One would typically think just for breakfast in the morning, one can start with a lovely frittata with loads of salad, of vegetables in that frittata with free-range eggs, or an omelette with a lovely vegetable filling, or a smoothie made with fermented kefir milk and coconut and seeds and nuts in there, and berries and a banana and dates. So to have a variety in every meal. And then there's a big question and the argument about raw and cooked. I believe in balance. I don't believe in any dietary extremes. So 50% of our diet should be raw, where 50% of our diet should be cooked. When we expose food to heat, we destroy our enzymes and most of our vitamins. But many of our minerals are better absorbed from cooked food, like lycopene in tomatoes and carotene in carrots. So today I'll have it cooked in a stew or a soup, and tomorrow I'll have it raw in a salad. So the first point is God made these versus man-made, and then the importance of having balanced proportions and variety in our diet. And last but not least is our water intake. Most of people are just chronically dehydrated. It doesn't mean coffee and alcohol or sodas. We need to have a good purified form of water. We need 300 milliliters of water per 10 kilogram of body weight. So it depends on body weight how much water you'll drink. An average person of 60 kilogram will drink around 8 glasses of water to sustain and properly hydrate the system. Thank you.
Methane is a very dangerous gas at present because there's a huge amount of it coming out of the Arctic oceans and the permafrost, previously frozen areas of Siberia and Alaska. And as the methane comes out, it amplifies the warming, which makes more methane come out. This is called a feedback. And methane is estimated to be 150 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide during its first year after it being emitted, and it gradually declines in potency, but that first couple of years is when it can do the most damage because it causes the most warming, which causes more methane to come out. And the volume of methane that is approximated to be stored in the East Siberian Arctic shelf is absolutely huge. Thousands of gigatons, potentially, from hundreds to thousands of gigatons. A billion ton is a gigaton. If only 1% of this methane were to be destabilized and released into the atmosphere, that would more than double the greenhouse gas content of the Earth's atmosphere. It's a terrible threat to our survival.
Okay, next thing I want to ask you about is how would we experience it? In other words, once it was in full cry, how would we experience it? What would happen to us?
Well,
how would we notice things have changed?
We already know that things have changed. The weather has already changed. You have to be either asleep or ideologically against acknowledging climate change, or really pretty crazy to miss that things have changed. But as the methane is emitted, it slowly spreads in what's being called a methane veil over the entire planet. And so we'll experience warmer years, we'll experience more instability in the jet streams, which is causing cold snaps in the winter because we have a melting ice pack in the Arctic, and that melting means that there will be cold winds as the winds come across it. It's a very complex system, the climate system. So some areas will temporarily experience colder winters, temporarily, until the ice is all gone. And then we have no chance of survival, as far as I'm concerned, because then all of this methane will start to come out. Now, what that will mean, basically, is the collapse of agriculture. And it will mean many things, but as far as I'm concerned, the greatest threat to humanity is the collapse of agriculture in the places where agriculture normally happens. And agricultural zones of the planet will move further north and further south, mostly further north. So the mid-latitudes will find it harder and harder to grow enough food to feed people. And from the current 7 billion population of Earth, it's expected that we will reach perhaps 9 or 10 billion by the middle of this century. And we are already past the carrying capacity of the planet. So what it will look like when crop failures start in earnest through climate change is a very disturbing image. It boggles the imagination.
How did you find out about it?
Well, the methane problem came to my attention back in 2007 when I first did work with Al Gore's climate project. And in the presentation that I was given to make my own presentations from, there were 2 slides in particular, one of them showing bubbles coming up, filmed in 2007. And the bubbles were methane gas coming from the Siberian region. And then there was another slide where some students were on an ice-covered lake and they punctured a hole in the ice and lit it on fire with a lighter, and it flared with a very, very strong sound.
Let's turn that off.
Buenas tardes con todos. Iniciamos este evento de minería de pueblos.
We'll pick up where I left off. The students were out on the surface of an Arctic lake and they punctured a hole in the ice and lit the gas that you could hear hissing, and it lit on fire. And then someone came along with a long iron bar and punctured a hole, widened the hole from the side, and it flared and went
Wow.
and I knew that when the Arctic starts emitting flames, essentially, that we have a problem. Again, methane is much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2, and during the first year of its release is when it does the most damage, creating more warming in a vicious cycle.
They say that methane dissipates within 8.4 years, according to Mrs. Gandhi.
No.
What does dissipating mean?
No. Dissipates. Yes, what does dissipate mean? Well, if it spreads out over the Earth, that's not really a whole lot better. It's not cooling, it's not warming the Arctic, which is the worst, but it's warming everywhere else, which is not exactly a very good idea either. Now, I can show you the graphs, but the decay of methane when it's in the presence of the air, hydroxyl radicals in particular, methane becomes CO2 and H2O. But it degrades exponentially, where from 150 times as powerful. Is there anything else you want to turn off?
I just can hear it from that one, but I think it's all right.
Where from 150 times as powerful a greenhouse gas, over a 20-year period, it's only 86 times as powerful, and over a 100-year period, it's only 23 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as CO2. Only? Well, it's that first year or two when it's 100, 150 times as powerful. That's when all the damage is done in terms of setting off the feedback. That's the danger point, as far as I'm concerned.
You talked about one of the reasons why man doesn't do anything about it being because he's got a mindset that is like almost like a virus.
Yes, there's. Well, I know Al Gore in his famous movie said, quoted, I'm not sure if it was Oscar Wilde, that it's very hard for a person to see what they're paid not to see. That's a paraphrase. But in my own analysis of the problem, I came up with the following explanation, that the global human civilization is running under a default operating system. Now, no one has ever spoken to you about an operating system for a global civilization, more than likely. So if you pay a moment and say, well, what is the operating system? What ticks? What makes things tick? Or to give you a hint, what makes the world go round? money and economics are the operating system of the human civilization upon Earth. And money and economics acts as though it were a virus. The money itself is what's known as a meme. A meme was defined the word was coined about 40 years ago, and it's defined as a viral thought form that passes itself between individuals from generation to generation, from nation to nation. It takes over. And in fact, money is a meme that has been developing, taking over for tens of thousands of years, perhaps. Well, let's say 10,000 years. I'm not a historian. I don't want to go places I can't back up. But certainly for the last couple of thousand years, and in a very focused way for the last few hundred years, money has become the operating system of our planet. And in particular now, we have a branch of economics, and economics and money are intimately related. And we have a branch of economics which has been anointed as the dominant and pretty much the only acceptable economic system in any nation today. And it has a name, but few people know that it has a name because the name was dropped out of the record about 100 years ago when it was put in place. And that name is neoclassical economics. Now, neoclassical economics has a flaw. Neoclassical economics holds as a basic belief, axiom, that the planet makes no difference, that there is no...
It's looking up.
Let's...
No, just I was hoping to get you to look up because this one's giving else in the ecosystems.